Happy Friday! Today I'm reading 3 pages from the appendix called The Parnell Frame-Up out of this book. And here we go. Hold on to clean my specs for clear vision. So we don't miss anything. Okay. Although born in Dublin, Robert Anderson despised the Irish, or rather any Irishman who wasn't a conservative unionist. He belonged to one of those Irish Protestant families who had the fiercest hatred and dread of the purposes of the majority of their countrymen. He was the younger son of a family who for at least 2 generations had given their zealous and effective support to the open and secret forces that were arrayed against the Nationalists and the Nationalist Party. Anderson wanted to be an Englishman, and the closest he could get was slavish subservience to English interests. No one could suppose, he wrote, that the United Kingdom will tamely consent to be swamped by a horde of Irish paupers and agitators. His father was Crown Solicitor at Dublin, his brother Samuel a solicitor in the Crown Prosecution Department, and Anderson himself a rising star in the political police. All 3 operated out of Dublin Castle, which throughout Victoria's reign was one of the world's great citadels of despotic repression. It was from the castle that Anderson ran his network of intrigue, agents, provocateurs, and coppers narcs. Business was always brisk. Over 1 million Irish people had died in the Great Famine of 1846, and 3 million had been forced to emigrate. Ireland is boiling over and the scum flows across the Atlantic was a typical comment from the British press of the day. They took their tears and their hatred with them, and occasionally they came back with dynamite. The British had created what they most feared. Half of Ireland's population were now out of their control. In the slums of Baltimore and Boston, young Irishmen with revenge in mind formed secret societies. Willful government blindness empowered these Fenian outrages, when the solution was timeless, universal, and simple. If you want to stop terrorism, get out of their fucking country. Ireland was an imperial adjunct in a state of permanent defeat. Law was whatever came out of a soldier's mouth. What resistance there was quelled without quarter, its patriots arrested, incarcerated, sometimes tortured, and not infrequently hanged. Since the time of Oliver Cromwell, Ireland had been a de facto police state. Nascent hopes of independence were crushed in an orgy of corruption when in 1800 the Irish were introduced into an act of permanent union with Great Britain. Byron called it the union of a shark with its prey. There is no crime recorded in history which will compare for a moment with the means by which the union was brought about. Thereafter, cordial relations were sustained by the enduring presence of 35,000 British bayonets. For most of his political career, Gladstone had supported the imperial presence. But in 1886 he had a change of mind and declared himself in favor of Home Rule, the government of Ireland by the Irish. A frisson of horror ran through the Monite classes, their anguish in direct correlation to their wealth. Salisbury called it the greatest threat to empire since Napoleon, and Victoria fouled her corset. The name of the game was acquiring countries, not giving them up. Gladstone was plunging a knife into the heart of the British Empire. She already loathed him, a dangerous old fanatic. And since the Fenians had tried to dynamite a statue of her dead husband in Dublin, she similarly despised the Irish. No one would go to Ireland, she gawped. People only go there when they have their estates to attend to. Her point of view was precisely the Irish point of view, but from a rather different perspective. Over the centuries, land grabs had created vast estates, with palatial houses built for migrating English aristocrats. They stole the best of it. The Irish got the rocks and the box. No one had ever pretended any subtlety of intention. Rip off the real estate, then rent an acre or two to the people who had owned it, and if they couldn't pay or wouldn't pay, kick their arses off, demolish their hovels, and let them starve. I have seen the Indian in his forest and the Negro in his chains, wrote a French traveler, Gustave de Beaumont, and I thought then I beheld the lowest terms of human misery, but I did not know the lot of Ireland. Well, on a side note, mon chéri Gustave, the forest people were perfectly happy until you came along. A minute more of the British was a minute too many. And for the first time in decades, there seemed to be a reason for the Irish to hope. The Act of Union had furnished seats in the Westminster Parliament for Irish nationalists. In 1886, there were 57 of them, led by a 40-year-old enigma called Charles Stuart Parnell. Resistance to British rule was defined by this indefatigable Irishman. His political genius was acknowledged by all, but fathomable by nobody. He achieved his unique success by the possession of a unique capacity of holding his tongue, was the judgment of W.T. Stead. Parnell was a man sparse of words, but when he spoke, he was obeyed. Parnell put an end to Fenian violence, depriving his conservative opponents of a staple of condemnation. He fought the right honourable gents on their own terms. In debate, he was invincible, wrote the Irish historian Shane Leslie. More than a politician, he was a principle, and principles are not easily broken. The 57 nationalist MPs held the balance of power in a precarious parliament, and Parnell made no secret of his indifference to the asinine squabbling of British party politics. He would side with anyone, Tory or Liberal, if there was a deal to be done on the side of Ireland. His association with Gladstone over Home Rule was a catastrophe for the Conservatives. The London Stock Exchange lost a quarter of its value, bleeding £4 million, an astronomical hit for the 1880s, but mere pocket money compared to the £100 million sterling the city and its bandits had leaning on the security of Irish real estate. Salisbury, who replaced Gladstone as Prime Minister in July 1886, knew very well that he couldn't counter Home Rule by parliamentary means. Forget democracy. Democracy wasn't up to the crisis. Voting was all very well when you knew you were going to win, but worthless in these circumstances. Something more exotic was required. They were going to have to devise a way to eradicate the mad old idiot Gladstone, and to neutralize Home Rule in the process. In short, they were going to have to fit Parnell up. By now, Anderson had quit Dublin and was operating out of London. He'd brought his Bible with him. When he wasn't pawing through it, he was preaching from his local pulpit, putting himself about like some sort of secretary to the late Jesus Christ. Years later, when he was finally rumbled for the viper he was, the contemporary verdict was harsh. He had violated the traditions of the high position he held, and was a man of violent political prejudices, so all-consuming that they often blind him to the difference between what is right and what is wrong. The Right Honourable Viscount Lord Salisbury had once remarked, "Ireland awoke the slumbering genius of British imperialism. It was wide awake now. And seeing it controlled a quarter of the land surface of the earth, Charles Parnell was about to discover that he had something to worry about." On 21st of December 1886, somebody placed an advertisement in the Times. Somebody. "Autographs wanted. £10 will be given by the advertiser for a collection of not less than 20 autographs of distinguished parliamentary leaders, to include Mr. Gladstone, Lord Hartington, Sir William Harcourt, Mr. Bright, Mr. Chamberlain, Lord Salisbury, Lord Randolph Churchill, Mr. Parnell, Mr. Sexton, and Sir M. Higgsbeach, must be supplied within the next fortnight." To be continued.